Everything you need to know about Balrog, one of the most terrifying entities in the Lord of the Rings universe. Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Terry and this is Marvelous Videos. What is the actual genesis tale of the Lord of the Rings Balrog? The Balrog, along with dragons, ents and orcs, is one of the most famous fantastical monsters seen in the Lord of the Rings. The Balrog, a wicked flaming beast brandishing a flame whip, famously pursues the Fellowship amid their frantic breakout from the mines of Moria. Gandalf wagers his life to fend off the beast and narrowly escapes death by reincarnating as Gandalf the White. However, their encounter made the Balrog memorable, despite it making only a brief appearance in Tolkien's trilogy. J.R.R. Tolkien would modify the Balrogs throughout his works. Balrogs change in rarity and strength among the Fellowship of the Ring, as well as the Silmarillion, and their fundamental nature shifts from hideous to divine. The Balrog seen in Moria is simply known as Durin's Bane, a name that alludes to the larger narrative hidden beneath this mighty creature. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Now let's begin. A brief history of Balrogs. The Balrogs, or Balrogath, were Maiar captured by Morgoth that disguised themselves in darkness and flame and brandished whips and swords. Famous Balrogs include Gothmog, who was killed by Ecthelion, and Durin's Bane, who was killed by Gandalf. Historically, in unrecorded ancient days, the Balrogs were fierce Maiar. They were willing to join Melkor's cause because they were impressed with his magnificence and strength. The Balrogs and other monsters in Melkor's service once lived in Utumno, Thangorodrim's citadel, but following their master's downfall during the War for the Sake of the Elves, they retreated to Angband and were dormant there. Tolkien subsequently noted in his works that there could never have been more than 7 Balrogs, but they were capable of driving away Ungoliant with what was termed as a storm of fire. Lungorthin was the name given to the ruler of the Balrogs in another early work. It's uncertain whether it's a different name for Gothmog, although Christopher Tolkien believes it isn't likely because the term Gothmog was mentioned in the early Middle-earth texts. Originally, the Balrogs were frequently characterized as massive in number. It should be emphasized, however, that these works precede the public's The Lord of the Rings, but post-date the sources from which the printed The Silmarillion was derived. As a result, the exact number of Balrogs is unknown. Balrog in Sindarin means Devil of Might, derived from the roots Bal, meaning power, and Raug, or Rog, meaning demon. Valarauco is the Quenya form, while Valaraukar is the plural. The term Balrog was drawn from Ngwalarauco in older etymologies. However, this contradicts Quenya Valarauco. Balrog is Gloucester's Beluwig and Belubroga in a list of Old English counterparts of Elvish terms. According to Christopher Tolkien, this Old English term comprises the parts Belu, which means evil, as in baleful, and Weirg, which means wolf or outlaw, or Broga, which means fear.
The other a Balrog of Morgoth channeled all his hatred into the tree to destroy it.
Balrogs during the Year of the Trees. Balrogs were first noticed during the Tree Years when Melkor with Ungoliant journeyed to Valinor and demolished the 2 trees. The Balrogs had remained in the Angband pits until this time. Morgoth returned to the wreckage of Angband to re-establish his control over Middle-earth after destroying the trees with Ungoliant. After a disagreement with Ungoliant, she assaulted him, and Morgoth let out a tremendous yell, rousing the Balrogs from deep rest. The Balrogs pursued Ungoliant until she ran away in a hail of fire and were prepared to follow her, but they were then halted by Morgoth and taken to Angband, which was later rebuilt. Balrogs in the First Age. Once the Noldor had won the Battle of Dagor Nuin Gileath, Feanor marched on aggressively toward Angband. He got as close to Angband as he could before being attacked by a swarm of Balrogs and a few Noldor. Soon he stood alone, yet for a long time he battled alone with all the Balrogs as the mightiest of all the children of Iluvatar, despite being enveloped by fire and afflicted with many wounds. Feanor was eventually defeated and gravely wounded by Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs. Feanor's son, Maithros, convinced Morgoth's soldiers to sign a phony pact, but Morgoth deployed his Balrogs instead. With the exception of Maithros, who was transported to Angband, everyone else was slaughtered. Years down the line, all through the Dagor Bragollach, the Balrogs set forth from Angband with Glaurung and an army of orcs to attack the elves' castles and slay their partners, the Edain. The Balrogs battled throughout the near-Ninth Arnoediad, in which they were headed by Gothmog. He pushed Hurin and Turgon away, then turned on Fingon and murdered him with the assistance of some other Balrogs, clearing the ground for Morgoth's army. He also caught Hurin after he was buried behind a mound of killed enemies. He tied the mortal warrior and carried him to Angband, wherein Morgoth unsuccessfully sought to extract the whereabouts of Gondolin from him. In the fall of Gondolin in FA 510, the Balrogs rode on the back of dragons to approach the concealed city. Glorfindel and his friends were stopped by another Balrog while attempting to flee the burning city. Glorfindel battled the Balrog atop a cliff to save Tuor, Idril and their young child Eärendil, but he was taken down alongside the Balrog to his grave. The last of the Balrogs battled in the War of Wrath. Although most of them were destroyed, some escaped and took refuge in Earth's deep caves. Ecthelion, Lord of the Fountain, succeeded in murdering Gothmog at the expense of his own life. Balrogs in the Second Age. Sauron assembled all the terrible things that remained from Morgoth's days on Earth and below it, beginning the Accursed Years, but no Balrogs are recorded as being present at this time. Balrogs during the Third Age. When the dwarves dug too deeply for Mithril in TA 1980, one Balrog awakened in Khazad-dûm. It chased the dwarves from their home and killed King Durin VI, earning the Balrog the moniker Durin's Bane. In the War of the Ring, the Fellowship of the Ring crossed through Moria and was chased by Durin's Bane to the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Gandalf the Grey defeated the Balrog, freeing the Fellowship from Moria. Both plummeted down the chasm, but the action continued at Zira-Zigil's summit. It eventually ended, although both Gandalf as well as Durin's Bane were killed in the process. The Valar later returned Gandalf as Gandalf the White. How did Gandalf defeat and kill the Balrog? Despite the fact that the original Lord of the Rings movie was released in theaters 2 decades ago, the film and its sequels remain timeless classics. Fans and reviewers alike regard Fellowship of the Ring as one of the finest fantasy films ever created. It brought a slew of new admirers to J.R.R. Tolkien's enormously rich universe and laid the groundwork for how the genre would become. Game of Thrones and other shows have benefited greatly due to the Lord of the Rings movies. Gandalf the Grey, Frodo's longtime friend and the Fellowship's guide, faces off against the Balrog in one of the film's most iconic moments. Upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm, he seems to defeat the gigantic beast, destroying the bridge underneath Balrog's feet. On the other hand, Durin's Bane is not easily vanquished and makes one more bid on Gandalf's life as it falls into darkness. It seizes Gandalf with its blazing whip and drags the great sorcerer down with it. Gandalf's farewell words to his cherished companions are now legendary. "Fly, you fools!" A frantic last exhortation that characterizes one of the opening installment's most memorable sequences is well known to even non-Lord of the Rings aficionados. Even those who have established a yearly tradition of seeing Peter Jackson's excellent films are perplexed by the events that follow. Gandalf, who was supposed to be dead, defeats the Balrog and returns to his comrades, having been promoted from Gandalf the Grey to Gandalf the White. Some spectators wonder how a tired Gandalf might beat one of Middle-earth's most formidable foes as they continue the details of this pivotal fight. A number of things contributed to Gandalf's final destruction of the Balrog, but before we go into the duel, you'll need some backstory on the wizard to assimilate everything. Gandalf, you see, belongs to the Maiar. These ancient creatures contributed to shaping the world, and they remained on Middle-earth over the millennia to support and guide its inhabitants. Each of the 5 incarnated wizards is a Maiar, but we only know 3 of them: Gandalf the Grey, Saruman the White, as well as Radagast the Brown, who debuts in the Hobbit trilogy but also has a brief mention in the original movie. Gandalf also doubles as a ring bearer. He holds Narya, also called the Ring of Fire, one of the elves' 3 rings of power. The ring is said to grant Gandalf more power over fire, and that may have helped his chances of killing the Balrog, a flame-swathed demon. Following an 8-day chase up the Endless Stair, the Balrog and Gandalf fight for 2 full days and nights. Gandalf and the Balrog drop into a deep underground lake after their combat upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm. The cold awakens Gandalf and almost freezes his heart and disperses the Balrog's flame, significantly weakening it. The Balrog explodes again into flame atop the huge Silvertine mountain, also known as Celebdil, and battles Gandalf for hours. Gandalf, deprived of his staff's strength, fights the monster with Glamdring, his formidable elven sword. Both Gandalf and the Balrog are killed in the combat. The wizard subsequently repeatedly reappears, but not because he won the fight. Gandalf admits to throwing his opponent down from the unimaginably high arena, destroying the rock below with the power of its fall, but is soon overtaken by darkness. He subsequently recalls that he drifted from thoughts and time, wandering far on routes he could not articulate. Even though Gandalf's spirit strayed far, it returned back to give the immortal wizard one more chance at slaying Sauron. He returned as Gandalf the White, armed with increased access to his Maya might, and resolved to carry on the War of the Ring up until its conclusion. Are Balrogs going to appear in the Rings of Power? A short remark in The Lord of the Rings of Power, might just have revealed the appearance of the series Balrog. While trailers have previously established that a Balrog will arrive, it hasn't been revealed where or when the frightening creature of Morgoth would appear. Although it would be odd considering the series' location in the Second Age on Middle-earth, this Balrog might be Durin's Bane, the same corrupted Maya that fought Gandalf the Grey during the Fellowship of the Ring. Elrond is appointed by the Elf High King Gil-galad to partner up with Celebrimbor, the expert smith, to create the most gigantic forge in Middle-earth, which must be completed by spring. As per Celebrimbor, the forge would be capable of producing powerful artifacts like the Rings of Power. With the vast workforce required, Elrond advises reaching out to the dwarves within their mountain realm of Khazad-dûm, better known as Moria. Elrond, who hasn't seen his old buddy Prince Durin IV in 20 years, must first restore his friendship, which has been damaged by their divergent ideas of time. On the other hand, Durin's wife, Princess Disa, is considerably more hospitable and asks Elrond to stay for supper. Disa demonstrates her talent in speaking to the mountain in the Rings of Power. The dwarves may discover important information about the mountain via this resonating, such as the locations to mine and build new passages, as well as where to end up, leaving the mountain alone. As such, understanding where to leave the mountain alone might be crucially foreshadowing. It seems the Balrog, subsequently known as Durin's Bane, is presently hibernating deep under the mines of Moria. Now, the Balrog could be disturbed far earlier than anticipated in the Lord of the Rings storyline. According to the Middle-earth timeline, the Balrog was most likely active throughout the First Age and War of Wrath, prior to actually retiring to sleep underneath Khazad-dûm, only to be reawakened by the dwarves with their mining in the Third Age, who became greedy in their pursuit of mithril, an extraordinarily precious and extremely strong metal. Durin IV died as a result of this in the year 1980 in the Third Age. The Balrog's next appearance will be in Fellowship of the Ring in 3019, where it would be defeated by the wizard Gandalf the Grey. As a result, assuming Princess Disa's predictions about the mountain are accurate, Durin's Bane may awaken during the Second Age. Having said that, the Rings of Power's forthcoming Balrog might be a whole new servant of Morgoth, given that there were several Balrogs active throughout the First Age. In any case, a Balrog will be arriving on the Rings of Power, bringing with it lots of carnage and havoc in the upcoming episodes. All about their terrifying appearance. Balrogs were often towering, terrifying entities that resembled humans but appeared to be made of or enveloped by shadow and fire. They wielded a blazing sword as well as a flaming whip. They were continuously on fire and their weapons seemed molten. Gothmog, the ruler of Balrogs during the First Age, also wielded a black axe. It's uncertain and widely argued if Balrogs had wings or not. Balrogs seem to embody and convey power and fear, maybe as a black cloud of the Valar's magnificence. Tolkien also mentions Balrogs with flowing, flaming manes. Furthermore, they might have been able to change their bodily structures on occasion, like when Durin's Bane plunged into a body of water during his battle against Gandalf and transformed into something slimy. It's also likely that this other shape was Gandalf employing colourful words to express what the Balrog looked like after its flame was doused and it was shrouded in water. It's also plausible that maybe the Balrog, just like all the Ainur, could change shape. This also may not have been the case. Balrogs in major adaptations. Durin's Bane has wings in the 2001 film The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Jackson's Monster of Might was a hazy combination of darkness and fire. Only its spiky head, cloved feet, and hooked hands were visible. Due to budget concerns, the pursuit up the endless stair and the slimy Balrog were deleted from the 2002 movie The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. However, a portion of Gandalf's combat with the Balrog is presented towards the start of the film, and the battle atop Zirak Zigil is depicted in a flashback following Gandalf's return. Earlier illustrators such as Ted Naismith represented Balrogs without wings, but Jackson's films followed the concept of Tolkien artist John Howe, standardizing wings for Balrogs in the same manner that Jackson standardized pointed ears for elves. Balrogs can be found in Middle-earth PC and video games, as well as in merchandise. Who would win if a Balrog fought a dragon? Middle-earth is full of intriguing matchups, none more so than a Third Age confrontation between the last remaining dark powers of fire. What if Smaug had pursued the riches of Moria instead of Erebor and thereby awoke Durin's Bane? Who would triumph? Balrogs and dragons both began as helpers of Morgoth, the very first and greatest Dark Lord in the First Age. The Valar Aukar, the tyrants of fire known in Middle-earth as the Balrogs, creatures of dread, were the most terrifying of the Maiar souls Morgoth enticed into his service. According to Legolas later in Moria, Balrogs are the most lethal of all Elfbanes, except the one who dwells inside the Dark Tower, and, aside from Sauron, the Balrogs are ranked above all of Morgoth's minions in the Silmarillion. In the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings, their principal narrative purpose is to offer a sufficiently heroic and dramatic death to the most outstanding men. Ecthelion, Feanor, Fingon, Gandalf the Grey, and Glorfindel all reach their ends in conflict with these ancient world monsters. One can't help but wonder what have occurred if Glorfindel had joined the Fellowship of the Ring as Elrond wanted. Would he have taken Gandalf's place in battling the Balrog upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm and uttered a memorable statement as he fell into the abyss? Dragons' origins are murkier. Nowhere does Tolkien tell us how dragons came to be, but the first dragon, Glaurung, communicated via the evil spirit that existed within him in the Children of Húrin. The original dragons were most likely Maya spirits inhabiting mortal bodies, similar to wizards, but with scaly bodies and fire. Tolkien's dragons are weapons of enormous destruction. In fact, the dragons that demolished the elf city of Gondolin in the earliest editions of Tolkien's Legendarium are weapons of war, not actual beasts. Tolkien subsequently altered them to resemble the more recognizable picture of the dragon from Western legend. Yet, the dragons on Middle-earth are nevertheless extremely clever, sarcastic, and love causing havoc. In the Silmarillion, Glaurung sows ruin both with his fire breath and his prowess at mind control and deception. He brainwashes Turin Turambar and his sibling Ninor into engaging in incest and then committing suicide, which is a terrible move even for a demon lizard. So, how do they compare? The writings don't offer much support for our cause. Balrogs and dragons never fight each other in Middle-earth, although they do appear in a few fights during the First Age. Balrogs were in Glaurung's train when he first appeared at the Battle of Sudden Flame. This implies that the Balrogs were either loyal to Glaurung or acted as his support. More tellingly, the Balrogs were slain in the War of Wrath, which ended Morgoth's dominion and also the First Age, with the exception of a few who fled and sheltered themselves in impassable tunnels at the Earth's roots. However, the emergence of the winged dragons, who were the ancestors of Smaug, was so abrupt and disastrous that the Valar's host was driven back. Tolkien doesn't say how many dragons or Balrogs there were, thus we don't know how significant a role the sheer number of Balrogs and dragons had. Nonetheless, the dragons proved to be more efficient in battle. Then there's Gandalf the Grey, who attempted to slay a Balrog on his own, but then chose to trick some dwarfs and a very reluctant hobbit into grappling with Smaug. Granted, Gandalf didn't go out to confront a Balrog, and he perished in the act, but it's interesting that he didn't even attempt to defeat Smaug on his own. So we'll have to rely on our wild imaginations to figure out how this confrontation will play out. As it goes, any self-respecting dragon would blast his scorching breath first, but this would not deter a demon of fire like a Balrog. Balrogs have a number of weapons at their disposal, including flame swords, whips with several thongs, and magic. A blazing sword is probably useless with a dragon, and spells don't appear to work effectively on them as well. The elven folk of Nargothrond possessed plenty of magic, yet it didn't stop Glaurung. So the Balrog is left with his lash of several thongs, which he may use to tie Smaug. But Smaug's teeth are like daggers, his claws are like spears, and he can break himself free of his predicament. However, Balrogs might be able to fly. They do have wings. Even if Balrogs could indeed fly, and none of what Tolkien ever said suggests they can, they indeed fail at it. 2 Balrogs are known to have fallen into chasms, Durin's Bane and the other vanquished by Glorfindel. That is hardly an encouraging track record for terrifying winged monsters. So, while Smaug can stay a safe distance from his hellish opponent, it doesn't help him to win. More importantly, flying exposes Smaug to danger. It reveals his one weakness, a little exposed area on his underbelly. Balrogs are formidable fighters. Despite the fact that they can only fly as effectively as dead birds, they can almost certainly hurl a blazing sword with exact accuracy. Smaug remains rooted to the ground. The dragon's flames and the Balrog's weaponry are both ineffective. We've arrived at the point where the mighty dragon and the monster of dread are engaged in a frenzied, deathly, scorching embrace. But hold on, Smaug has one more weapon in his arsenal: his eyes. We don't know if Smaug can indeed freeze and mind control people as effectively as his forefather Glaurung, but simply catching a glimpse of Smaug's eye had made Bilbo want to hurry out and disclose himself and tell Smaug everything. In truth, he was in grave danger of succumbing to the dragon's power. In theory, whether close or far, Smaug's eyes may cast the dragon spell on Durin's Bane. But could the dragon spell work on the dreadful demonic Balrog? Balrogs and dragons are both Maya spirits at their core. Smaug is not Maya, yet his might is comparable, and we know that the strength of one Maya will impact the power of another Maya. After all, both Saruman and Gandalf are tempted by Sauron's ring. Inside the chamber of Mazarbul, Durin's Bane and Gandalf trade spells and counterspells that, according to the wizard, nearly shattered him. So the Balrog slips under the spell after catching a glimpse of Smaug's gaze. Even a split second, a moment of indecision or distraction, would suffice. Smaug would seize Durin's Bane and devour him with his sword-sharp fangs, because we know swords can slaughter Balrogs. And that's all there is to it. In a fight between Smaug and Durin's Bane, who would triumph? The dragon is most likely to be the victor, and we can only envision Smaug, victorious and stronger than ever, nestled up in a nest of mithril somewhere in Khazad-dûm after having devoured the demonic Balrog. What makes Balrogs so dangerous? Balrogs were very powerful beings. Ungoliant, a gigantic creature powerful enough to swallow the fruits of Telperion, the silver tree of Valinor, which generated the light for millions of stars, was driven away by only 7 Balrogs. Durin's Bane, a single Balrog, drove the dwarves of Khazad-dûm out of their old and magnificently defended home, which was the finest dwarven kingdom that had ever existed. It also fought Gandalf, and they destroyed each other. The Balrogs were so physically agile that their passage was reportedly described as a storm of fire. Gothmog battled and defeated Feanor, an elf regarded as the greatest of the children of Ilúvatar. One also wreaked havoc on the kingdom of Gondolin, which was teeming with similarly powerful elves. Conclusion. The Balrog, which appears to be nothing but an ordinary cave-dwelling fire beast at first glance, is one of the earliest monsters encountered by the Fellowship and was present in many of the pivotal conflicts that molded Middle-earth's destiny. Like many other creatures in The Lord of the Rings, the Balrog is surprisingly essential in Middle-earth's history. One intriguing fact not covered in The Lord of the Rings would be how Sauron, although a former servant of Morgoth, cannot or will not summon the other Balrogs to action, demonstrating how powerful and evil these spirits actually were. So, regardless of whatever occurs in The Lord of the Rings of Power, the introduction of a Balrog certainly elevates the stakes for the viewers and for the future plotline. And, if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like, and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, thanks for watching, and see you next time.